If you work in security or IT and your company has Okta, this message is for you. Imagine a world where only secure devices can access your cloud apps. In this world, phish credentials are useless to attackers, and you can manage every OS, even Linux, from a single dashboard. Best of all, you can get employees to fix their own device security issues without creating more work for IT. The good news is, you don't have to imagine this world. You can just start using Collide. Visit securityweekly.com/Collide to watch a demo today. That's securityweekly.com/KOLIDE.
Well, hello everyone again. I'm Bill Brenner from Cyber Risk Alliance and Security Weekly, and we're continuing our coverage from Black Hat 2023. And I'm pleased to be here with Richard Yu, Senior Director of Product Management Security at Edgio. Welcome.
Thanks for having me here, Bill.
How's your week so far?
It was great. Busy week. Met a lot of people, a lot of great folks at the conference.
Very good. So let's dive right in. So let's start, if you can, walk me through what you see as the most important trends right now in API security, and what you think the biggest challenges are for online businesses in that area today.
Yep, absolutely. You know, when it comes to API, you know, I would like to tell people, you know, our world nowadays runs on API. You know, if you have a phone, most of your API runs, like most of your application runs on API. If you have an IoT at home, which, I mean, who knows, your coffee pot most likely runs on API. I mean, hey, there's a HTTP status code just for the teapot, right? But you know what? The most important trend, you know, when it comes to API security, I would say is definitely on the visibility and visualization part. You know, as we always say, you can't really defeat anything that you can't see, right? When it comes to threat. So this is really something that has become more and more important for a lot of the organization we spoke with, especially for the lack of the visibility of like what kind of zombie API that's out there in the system.
Yeah, we did some research a few months back on third-party risks, and what you just said is exactly what a majority of survey respondents came back with. It's all about the visibility. So many APIs are created
right
just during the course of the day, doing business and working with third-party systems, that how do you keep track of them all?
Right.
So with that said, you've mentioned in the past, you've talked about being holistic with your solutions. And so, but talk about how it's different from point solutions as people are familiar with them today.
Right. So I'd first like to kind of like let's define that, right? Yep. So when we say point solutions, we usually means a specific capability that is designed to deal with a specific problem. Now that by itself is actually great. When you have specific problems and all you need to just solve that problems, it's actually perfect, right? However, when it comes to security, things aren't often that easy. Especially, let's say you look at API issues, you can look at botnet issue. Sometimes we need to have a multiple layers of solutions that actually work together, to help solve that problems for the customers, for our users, right? And this speaks to the concept defense in depth. I know it's probably a buzzword by now, but it's very important to understand that defense in depth, the concept of defense in depth, is that no single layer of specific solutions should be considered a silver bullet to solve a particular issues, right? So when you deal with a particular issues, you want to make sure that you have multiple layers of, let's say even with DDoS protections, you can actually utilize specialized DDoS mitigation solutions with firewall, for example, to actually provide, it's all about reducing the numbers and the probability of breach by having each layers serve as the filters, right, to to manage the risks.
Yep. So let's talk about the value proposition of the Edgio approach. So walk me through what you see as the pillars and how it fits together.
Right. So what we usually do, like I like to generally describe that using like the NIST framework, but I'm going to simplify that, right? Obviously in a lot of organizations they focus on prevention. Like a lot of like NIST framework, there's prevention, right? But we see that we want to help customers, not just bolster the preventions, but also provides them the capability to respond. Right. You have detect and response. You want to provide the ability to detect and respond because there are things like 0 days. I mean, as much of prevention that you put in, right? You're still gonna have to react very quickly. What Edgio do, it's like through our holistic security, right? We aim to actually help customers, like increase their mean time to response, as well as like we call it time to mitigate, times to resolutions on any issues by providing the solutions, the capability, and the services to really help them close their gap when it comes to like the ability to have visibility when it comes to detection, as well as the ability to respond to any issues.
Yeah. So you've answered some of this already, but just for the sake of getting more and more specific, the trend in the industry is to consolidate solutions, technologies, but how do enterprises know what to do next in terms of architecting a more streamlined cybersecurity infrastructure and connect that with where Edgio comes in?
Absolutely. So this ties to probably the first questions you have is the difference between a point solutions and a holistic solutions. Because what we find with working with a lot of organizations is that they're having to stitch together a lot of solutions, not just from a like security perspective, but also on the performance like perspective. It's that, and that generally generated a lot of what we call NFR, non-functional requirement. Like, well, in order to improve your performance, in order to improve your security, you also have to worry about how scalable this is. Is this going to cause a single point of failure? I have to spend like 2-3x the amount of time trying to work on a failback policy, etc. What we try to advocate for a customer is to like have a seamless way to use a platform that just natively stitch all of this together. So imagine if you can run your API security, your DDoS protection, your bot defense, all within one software stack, within a platform. Would you rather run it across 3 different separate proxy where you pass traffic from one to another? So this is where we come in. This is where we help our customers enhance their efficiency while trying to achieve and improve their security posture. And by doing that, you also you technically reduce the surface area. By doing that, you actually reduce the risk, right, of unnecessary availability issues, and part of the CIA triad.
Very good. So with the market moving towards edge security to protect web applications, what are some of the different components? Zero trust is something that gets thrown around a lot, but let's talk about other things. Talk about what you see as the essential components, and from there, if you are the potential customer coming to Edgio and you're really trying to get a fix on whether this fits for your environment, and I'm speaking as the customer who's starting to think through these things, what are the big questions that they should be coming to you and asking to get to that answer of how Edgio can fit into my unique environment?
Right. So, so I generally expect a few questions from customers. So from, first of all, the ease of implementations. I strongly believe that a good security systems needs to be easy to use. A secure solutions It's easy to use. People are generally lazy.
Yeah.
If you have to jump through hoops to make yourself secure, there's less probability of you doing that. Customers generally also concerned, hey, is this going to cause additional issues from form of reliability and performance? Now that's very important, right? We always like to tell our customers, right? There's technically no such thing as 100% security. Honestly, like that's not something that will guarantee, and anyone can guarantee, because to me, 100% security means 0% functionality. I didn't come up with that. I stole it from the great Dr. Eric Cole.
Yes.
So one of the things that we always have to strike a balance, right? We want to improve security, but customers also concerned that you want to do it while actually making your site faster. And actually, so you don't actually have to pay the performance cost.
Make the site faster and stay out of the user's way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. The UX is very important. So how do you actually secure customers while actually making them faster, not just in the performance, but also making customers' teams work faster, improve their team velocity. This is why Edgio, when it comes to Edgio application platform, we pride ourselves for like helping customers around these 3 pillars: performance, security, and developer velocity. Everything we try to do is to ensure that things are easy to use and you get the added benefits of improving performance. And this applies to all of the security features that we have today, and also any new like additional like capability, like such as zero trust access that we might be adding onto our platform in the future.
Perfect. Well, I wish you much success this week as we go through. We're at Wednesday right now, so as we go through the week, I hope you have a lot of great conversations with clients and prospects, and thanks for coming on.
All right, thanks for having me here. Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And we are back, continuing our live coverage from Black Hat USA 2023 here at Mandalay Bay. And it's my pleasure to be joined with Antonio Sanchez. I can't seem to talk today. So you're the principal evangelist at Fortra. Glad to have you here. And let me just dive right in, because one of the subjects that's really near and dear to my heart is vulnerability management, because I've been, in one way or another, writing about it or editing about it or researching about it for the better part of 20 years. And for all of our advancements over the years, it continues to be a moving target. So my question for you is, why is vulnerability management such a challenge, particularly in today's climate?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me today. Vulnerability management has been around a long time. And even though it's been around a long time, you'd figure by now we would get it right, or get it pretty close to being right, but it is a moving target, and it goes back to the threat landscape. I'm sure you've seen this. It is by far just changing so fast and so rapidly. There's the footprint today is much different than what it was 20 years ago with the rapid adoption of the cloud. And every time you put your workloads out in other places, you have a whole new set of vulnerabilities to think about. And then there's always the new vectors, the new things that we hadn't thought about, that nobody really thought about until they became a thing. So there's always going to be vulnerabilities. There's always going to be software that's going to be created. Software inherently is going to have some bugs. You can't create perfect code. It's just not possible. But everywhere you turn, there's always going to be some sort of vulnerability, something out there. And then the hard part is, because of the volume of vulnerabilities, it's impossible to get to everything.
Yep.
So you've got to make some decisions. What can I get to? What can my staff get to that's going to make the biggest impact? Because I'm not going to get to all 1,000 that I found this week.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to a fraction of those, and then there's going to be another 1,000 next week.
What's most important in your environment in terms of
Exactly.
criticality is not the same as any
Right.
number of other environments.
Exactly. And it's different for everybody. It's different because what's important to you may not necessarily be important to me. And people need to, I think that's kind of, when vulnerability management started, it was mostly vulnerability scanning, and it was vulnerability scanning for trying to find, all the things to patch. Well, then we get into, okay, well, I can't patch everything. So what are the highest the most critical things I should worry about patching? Okay, well, sometimes the most critical things that you have may not necessarily be a critical asset that you need to patch. So it goes back to understanding, what do I have in my environment, what's important to me, and then from what I find, this is where some of the intelligence comes in, and why vulnerability that's evolved from being scanning to management to even assessments, is putting some intelligence behind what are the things that matter to my business, what are the business drivers, what are the growth drivers, how are people handling data, how's data coming in, how do we make money, and then making decisions based on, based on these assets are critical for us, so anything that comes up we have to prioritize with this, and at the end of the day, you want to focus your resources that are on the things that are going to make the biggest impact for your organization. And it's as true now as it was 20 years ago, as it will be 5, 10, 15 years ago, because there's always going to be that next thing.
Yeah. Now, in following you and Fortra, I've heard you talk elsewhere about the importance of thinking like a threat actor. Spend a couple minutes now talking me through what that looks like.
So you've heard the phrase, layers of defense, and
Yep.
and ensuring that you have multiple security controls across the organization, across the kill chain. And too often times what we find is organizations thinks, I've got all of my security controls, I'm doing actively reducing my footprint, but sometimes what they don't think about is, okay, how would I attack me, or how would somebody attack me? And if they attacked me, what could they do? How would they get in? And once they're in, what are the things they can do? Where can they move laterally? Can they get to the crown jewels of my organization or not? And so when we say thinking like a threat actor, it's being able to track the tactics, techniques, and the procedures, the TTPs, on what is it that the threat actors are doing. Because the threat actors are always evolving. For every innovation that comes out to improve the efficacy of security, the threat actors are using them as well to figure out how can they implement that in with their attacks. So thinking like a threat actor is just that, is if an adversary was to get in, what could they do, and what could they get to, and how detrimental and how critical would that be for our organization?
So can you give an example of a case where you helped a client address these issues
Sure.
and harden their defenses and restructure using Fortra? Can you give an example of a case where you did that and what it looked like?
So one of them that comes to mind. So we were working with a national manufacturing organization. They're mature practices. They do internal penetration testing, but as part of their security program, they also once a year bring in a third party to do their own penetration testing. So a year ago, when they did it, they had another company did it, and they fared actually pretty well with whatever third party they used the year prior. So this year they used Fortra, which within our portfolio, it's the product is called Core Impact as a Service that we provide for customers. So this was the first time that they contracted us to do the pen testing for them and see what would happen. Our pen testing team, our team that did the pen testing, was able to harvest about 900 credentials, many of them admin credentials. It was to the point where they could have literally taken over the manufacturing company's entire domain. So you can imagine, once their jaw dropped, metaphorically, and once they realized, like, oh my gosh, this is both very scary, but at the same time, it was eye-opening. I said, well, I'm glad that they did that in a safe environment, being us doing it for them, because this way they could figure out, exactly what they needed to do to harden that environment, because we provided them the report of this is how we got in, this is how we got the first set of credentials, then this is how we moved laterally, then this is we got other credentials, and the different steps along the way, so that this gave the organization the opportunity to understand, okay, this is what we need to do to harden this environment. This is what we need to do to update this configuration. This is what we need to do to update permissions, and so on and so forth, to reduce that. Because had that happened and an adversary have done that, I mean, it literally would have put them out of business, having their entire domain taken down.
Yeah. So with vendor consolidation at the top of many a CISO's mind these days, that's what comes up repeatedly as I talk to CISOs. What can Fortra do to help mature? And some of this you've already described, but this is to really tie it all together. What can Fortra do to help mature organization security programs?
Sure. At the end of the day, it's being able to stitch and integrate the solutions together and to become a force multiplier for the organizations, because the organizations, the talent shortage isn't going away anytime soon. So the products, the tools have to do more. And what we've been hearing, and I'm sure you've been hearing it as well, is customers buy best of breed of everything, but then they're left figuring out how to stitch everything together. And in the end, they only end up using 5 to 10% of the capacity of multiple tools. So what we've done with our portfolio is we've purchased several companies and their intellectual property, and we've integrated. We're integrating all the places where it makes sense to integrate, to make it easier for the customers to deploy, to make it easier to manage, to make it easier to be able to solve some difficult, complex use cases. And that's the strategy that we're going to continue moving forward, is do the integration, do the stitching for the customer. So wherever they are within their security maturity, we have something that can help them along the way. Because as you know, security is not a destination, it's a journey. So we want to be, we say we want to be their security ally, and we're that's what we want to be, is we want to help you on that journey. Let us be one of your allies, one of your partners on that journey with the breadth of portfolio and the integrations. Let us do the hard part, which is stitching these solutions together to solve those complex use cases.
Excellent. So that was great. Thank you. I wish you lots of success this week in your discussions. And we will be back.
Great. Thank you for having me.
And we are back, continuing our live Security Weekly coverage from Black Hat 2023 here at Mandalay Bay. Hope you're all having a great day. I am very pleased to be joined by Randy Watkins, CTO of Critical Start, and we're going to have a conversation now about MDR, about MCRR. And so let me go right in, because MDR has been a huge topic so far in 2023 when it comes to our audience and what they're interested in. And so when looking at the key differentiating factors among MDR providers, what should organizations be considering? What are the questions they need to ask themselves about their environment before making a choice?
That's a great question. So MDR is definitely a big piece of a lot of organization security infrastructure now, and it has a lot of benefits. Most organizations are using it for staff augmentation to really boost their internal resources, because everybody's suffering from the resource gap. Looking at how do you adopt and get the most utilization out of your MDR, things like tech stack, what kind of products have you already made investments in? How do you get more out of that investment? Where does your security team really need help filling gaps? And identifying how you would work in a third-party provider into your operations are definitely considerations that need to be taken into account. When looking at some specific MDR provider requirements, definitely making sure they align with that tech stack, looking at accountability, SLAs, how are they communicating with your team? How does your team work with them? And then really the overall value that you're expecting them to provide to your security posture. Really some things that most organizations kind of take into account when they head into it. But if they're not thinking about that, that's definitely where I would start. Tech stack alignment, and how are you going to operationalize that MDR inside of your environment?
And how it aligns with what your business's priorities are.
Yeah, so business priorities, honestly, some should be taken into account. Just building out your security roadmap, building out your security strategy. MDR is typically a tactical fold into that security strategy because most security organizations lack the resources to operationalize that investment on their own.
Yeah. So every solution has its challenges for some organizations for a variety of good reasons. Can you just go in a little bit on some of the common gaps, some of the common limitations that you've witnessed among your client base?
Yeah, MDR is pretty commoditized now. Mm-hmm. There's over 100 vendors out there that claim to do some level of MDR. So there's pluses and minuses across the board, and there's definitely an MDR out there for just about every organization. But looking across the spectrum and looking at what different MDRs offer, obviously that technology alignment. There are some MDR manufacturers that make their own technology, their own endpoint, their own SIM. There are some that leverage your existing investment. That's where Critical Start plays. We integrate tightly with Microsoft and Palo Alto and Sumo Logic and the like to really kind of drive the return on that investment. Other areas where you should definitely start evaluating or really place some emphasis: accountability, transparency. So are they doing what you're paying them to do, and how do you know it? Do they have contractual SLAs, or do they have hopes and dreams SLOs? And when you look at the SLAs too, one thing that we've seen is SLAs based on notification of alert, which seems a little odd. That's just an alert in and of itself. Mm-hmm. So SLAs around the true remediation, look for adherence to industry metrics like MTTD, MTTR. That's a pretty big differentiator. And then also the interaction between your team and the MDR, I think is critically important. How well do they fold into your business? How well can they wrap your business into their offering as opposed to cram your business into their box of an offering? MDRs are more or less flexible to like rules of engagement, how they respond. Some of them only make recommendations. And when you're looking at MDR, you're not looking for managed detection and recommendation. You're looking for managed detection and response. So making sure that MDR provider actually responds and contains the threat 24/7, but also that it has definable rules of engagement. If you don't want them to isolate your CEO's laptop at 2 a.m, then you should be able to declare that out of bounds while still maintaining response capabilities across the rest of the environment to stop that threat from moving laterally.
Yep. So when I think of MDR, I tend to think about ransomware because usually the conversations I have are within that context. But the threats that MDR is designed to help address are much more than that. So what are some of the other things that are top of mind? And I'm going to throw in there, when we look at where is the hype this year, it's all around AI, the good side of it and the bad side of it. And so what are your thoughts there?
Oh man, you can't walk down the hallway without hearing AI mentioned at least once or twice. I agree with you. A lot of times you think of threats, you think of ransomware. Ransomware absolutely is kind of the number one threat facing the industry from a tactical perspective. But what we're seeing, like patterns inside of ransomware, are pretty indicative of attacks broadly. So what we're seeing inside of ransomware is kind of a pullback from the spray and pray approach of ransomware, where we just launch it inside the environment and let it do its thing. What we're seeing more now is interactive attack behavior inside of the network before they launch ransomware. Ransomware is really just a parting gift. It's a thanks for having us. We'll see you next time. And that's what we're seeing with most attacks now. They're using law bins or live off the land binaries. They're kind of low and slow. They're living in the medium and low alerts. They're not setting off any big alarm bells until it's time to leave. And that's something that, another differentiator across MDRs, ask them how they're resolving alerts and what alerts they're resolving. We've always resolved every alert regardless of criticality. Different MDR players, your mileage may vary. But resolving all those medium and low alerts definitely helps us identify those low and slow attacks very early on in the kill chain or the attack framework, whatever you're kind of basing your security metrics on. AI, I think, just provides added speed, but really attacking a lot of the same vulnerabilities that we already get attacked through. So I think the AI for now is really just going to emphasize some of those vulnerabilities that need to be patched and need to be addressed with mitigating controls, because attackers are going to be able to hit them faster with more kind of a little bit more variation, but it's still going to be the same exploits. So really it comes down to doing the fundamentals correctly and looking at kind of posture more broadly.
So let's pivot now from MDR to managed cyber risk reduction. For those of you who are keeping track with acronyms, that's MCRR. Lots of alphabet soup in our industry.
Yes.
But talk about what that is as an evolution.
Yeah.
And what's the additional value that it provides?
So first of all, let me apologize for making another acronym in the alphabet soup of cybersecurity, but we did feel it was necessary. MDR, by its name, is very focused on detection and response. And we've done that for 8 years. Since before we had an acronym to link MDR to, we've been doing it. And we've always focused on reducing the most risk of any other MDR provider by having, resolving every alert in the 60-minute SLAs, contractual SLAs. But we wanted to do more, right? So as we start to operationalize the detection and response capabilities, organizations pivot their focus back to more proactive security controls, really looking at posture, exposure is all the buzz downstairs. And that's somewhere where we felt we could provide additional value, especially given all the visibility and expertise that we have in-house. So MCRR is really an expansion of MDR past the reactive controls and into the proactive posture. So now what we're looking to do is identify assets, identify which assets aren't covered by your EDR product, which is the most valuable signal that an MDR will get. Look at driving better utilization out of your SIM platform by finding SIM coverage gaps where you may not be feeding the right log sources, or maybe they're disconnected or blocked. Doing things like vulnerability prioritization, linking that back to those assets that may be missing EDR coverage, and really trying to improve the posture and security maturity of the organization, increasing the resilience to attacks, and using MDR more as a backstop. It's still a foundational control of MCRR. It's still a kind of a pivotal service point, but it shouldn't be used as the first and last line of defense. So MCRR is really building up those proactive security controls, bolstering up the security maturity, and then having the detection and response for those targeted attacks that still get past the basic security controls. And then the other problem that we saw that we wanted to solve was, how do you measure this? And how do you prove to your board, how do you prove to your leadership team that the investment that they're making in detection and response, in managed cyber risk reduction, is truly returning? So we've also built in a risk assessment module that allows organizations to take CSF questionnaires or ISO questionnaires and kind of track their progress and their maturity over time, so they can show that improvement. So to us, MCRR is the expansion beyond reactive security controls to address risk in a more holistic fashion and also measure the progress over time. So you can really show what your security organization is doing for the rest of the business and how much risk it's truly reducing on the organization's behalf.
So where does MCRR go from here? So what I mean by that is you've very clearly captured what it means in the present. Where do you see it evolving over the next 2 years?
Yeah, I definitely see more of the MDR players starting to form into the MCRR, and there are some that already have some of these capabilities, and they'll probably start identifying with this MCRR bucket. And from there, it's going to be an expansion into additional visibility and additional proactive controls. I think detection and response is pretty well handled at a face level. But once we start to bring in more signal, more telemetry, we can do more cross correlation to identify risky users on risky assets and then prioritize those for proactive controls while also monitoring them for potential reactive kind of detection and response scenario. We become much more powerful. I hate to use the buzzword, but there is a lot of synergy between the visibility that we get before there's an attack and the efficacy and efficiency of which we can detect and respond to an attack once we merge all those signals together. So I think, looking at vulnerabilities, looking at asset identification, EASM or attack surface management is absolutely going to fall into there. Attack path mapping, I think, has a valuable add-on to it. Breach and attack simulation certainly helps with controls validation. Controls validation in and of itself is probably due for a refresh. But combining all that together with the visibility from EDR, the new visibility that we're starting to get from different identity sources, response actions linked to identity and email, just makes for a more powerful and effective kind of security augmentation from a third-party provider, which a lot of organizations are going to have to look to for help as they continue to struggle with the headcount and expertise shortage that we're facing in security.
So in 2 years, we'll come back together and see how it all turned out compared to how we think it's going to go.
Yeah, hopefully we don't have to wait 2 years for our next conversation, but we'll definitely be talking more about MCRR in the future.
It was certainly a pleasure talking to you today. So hope you have a great rest of the week, and we will be back